Hello everyone, this one is called Jumping the Timelines. So, in my experience last night, I was catapulted into memories of things that's happened to me. So I thought I'd tell you about one or two of them, and also about some things that's happened to other people, and see how all this gets drawn together to complete the picture. So, there I am, it's 15 years ago, and I'm driving through Wales, and the roads are quite wet, and the roads are in very good condition, but there's lots of very sharp bends in them, and it just goes on for hours like that. At a particular point in my journey, I was travelling just under 40 miles an hour pretty much the whole way, and suddenly there is so much water on the road that the car tyres actually leave leave the road surface and are actually on the surface of the water. This is called aquaplaning. You can look it up if you like. Aquaplaning, common thing that happens. So there where I am. Suddenly the tires are not gripping the road, they're gripping the water instead, which of course has no ability to grip. And the next thing I know, I'm hurtling off the highway straight towards a rock face, which is about 30 feet in front of me. And there is no time to do anything other than to register that this is my reality. The next thing I'm aware of, the car has turned through 180 degrees, and remember, it was travelling at just under 40 miles an hour when it left the road, and it was only maybe 20 feet of grass before the rock face. Well, the car turns through 180 degrees and it stops dead with the two front tyres just on the very edge of the highway, so that if a vehicle was to be travelling shortly behind me, I would not collide with it. There was a long period of time during which I had absolutely no explanation for this. I just couldn't understand what had happened. All I knew is that I was alive, and also the car was completely undamaged. And that's a bit of an interesting thing, because this one is called Jumping the Timelines. So with my understanding now, obviously what I did is I found myself in a situation where there was no time to think. That's very important. And suddenly, rather than crashing into the rock face at just under 40 miles an hour, me and the car have transported ourselves to a different timeline, whereby we are just sitting there with our front wheels at the edge of the highway and everything's okay. That's my first example. My second example is much more recently. Somebody called Neil, who I trained to be a shamanic practitioner and also a retreat host. We were in Portugal together, and we were in the Atlantic Ocean having a water experience, as you do. And the next thing we both knew, the tide swept us very suddenly and abruptly. 1 minute there we were standing in the water with our feet on the sand. Suddenly our feet were dragged off the sand and we were dragged out into the sea. Very rapidly, quite a long way, completely outside of our depth. And the waves were quite wild. And as far as I could see, that was it. That was the end of this life, because I had no power to swim back to shore, and neither did Neil, because the current was so strong it completely overwhelmed our puny human efforts to get anywhere. And then Neil shouted, and he woke me up to the fact that the current was dragging us just as rapidly back towards the beach as it was taking us out just a moment earlier. Timeline jumping. We jumped from the timeline where we drowned at sea to the timeline where we found ourselves brought back as mysteriously as we'd been taken away. Another example involves someone who I trained, and we were having a water initiation. One of the most powerful water initiations I've had the pleasure to work with someone on is January. It's a very small river, and it's only 15 minutes walk away from my home at that time. And we do our usual thing of removing the outer clothes, getting into the water, and she asked me for help because she knows the point of the initiation is to do the whole thing properly, and so she did. So I held her and I lowered into the water, and I held her under the water for a very short time, just for a few seconds, and then she got out of the water. And as she rose up out of the water and was standing there in the water with me, we were both very cold, it was January, it started to snow heavily instantly. And so we found ourselves scrambling out of the river, drying ourselves off as best we could, getting our clothes on, feeling pretty cold at this point. And it was obvious that she had been removed from the reality that she inhabited when she got into the water, because she had no ability to understand where she was, how she got there, what was going on. She was completely disconnected from any ability to relate to what was going on and where she was. And so when we were both dressed, we started to literally took hold of her hand and pulled her up the track, and we started to walk. And she was explaining how she didn't know what was going on, where she was, who I was, anything. And I said, well, it's snowing, let's just get out of here, let's go to the wall. And so we did. And it's a walk that I will always remember, because there we are walking along. It's a blizzard, it's a really strong snowstorm. We're both absolutely freezing, and we're walking down a slope, and there is no connection with linear time whatsoever. There's no linear time, that's gone. All there is us walking in the snow, feeling very cold. And it goes on, and it goes on, because there is no linear time. It feels like the walk of eternity. It just keeps on going on, and I'm looking and I'm seeing the trees changing, I'm looking at the path, and I'm aware we're travelling distance. No progress appears to be being made. That was a truly extraordinary experience. Of course, at the end, we did tune back into linear time when the path ended, and we went back into the house and we had a hot drink and we warmed up. But that's another example of leaving behind a timeline and going into what I would call like an in-between state. And this relates very much to people who have experience with plant medicine. So I want to tell you about this one now. This was when I was working with a plant called Salvia divinorum. It was only a times 10 extract, but I was using the very powerful pranayama breathing, combining the two together. And after 10 minutes of good deep pranayama breathing, I then had one really deep inhalation of the salvia in the bong. 3, 2, 1, gone. Consensus reality as I know it, and as we all know it, was gone. I could not see the floor, I could not see my body, I could not see anything, I could not hear anything, it's all gone. No sensory input whatsoever, and more surprising still, no ability to think a single thought. I was simply taken from being in my yurt, where I had the experience, to I was in what seemed like South America, and it seemed like underground. It was like a temple, it had a particular shape, and there were stone tiles on the walls, and there were these beings, and they noticed my presence there, and they said, what's he doing there? So just like the previous one, but even more so, taken outside of any consensus reality, outside of all timelines, and into the in-between worlds. That's an experience I will always treasure. And then we have the experience of people who come on the plant medicine retreats, nature's medicine retreats, and many people working with the different medicines, the brown, the white and the green. So I'll give you quite a common experience. Suddenly the participant realizes they're piloting a starship and they're with beings, they know these beings, and it's all very familiar to them, and that's what they're doing. They're on a starship, they're piloting it, and they're traveling through the multiverse. And it doesn't seem at all strange to them because they have been disconnected from our conventional everyday consensus reality, and there they are out in the multiverse, and they're having all sorts of experiences. Now, the piloting a starship is one that comes up quite frequently, and it's particularly interesting, but there are many others, all sorts of different places a person might travel to in that sense. So the reason why working with plant medicines is so popular is because people are fascinated by jumping the timelines. And I've got so many more, but I feel that's where I want to leave it at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these experiences, these stories, and show you how it all comes together. Thank you.